My name is Alice, 54 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life in Seattle with my husband of 25 years. Then my phone pinged with 60 explicit photos that changed everything. My husband's mistress expected me to crumble, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. Before I tell you how I turned my heartbreak into justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to reinvent yourself after betrayal. Trust me, what happened next shocked everyone in our community. I always believed Robert and I had the perfect love story. High school sweethearts who married right after college, we built a beautiful life together in an upscale Seattle neighborhood. Our Tudor-style home with its perfectly manicured garden was the envy of our friends, a testament to my skills as an interior designer and Robert's success as a corporate attorney at Stewart and Mitchell Law. We raised two wonderful children who are now adults with their own lives. Our daughter Jessica lives in Boston with her husband working as a pediatrician. Our son Michael is finishing his PhD in Chicago. With the kids gone, Robert and I had been planning our retirement, dreaming of traveling the world together. We had even purchased a small vacation home on Lake Chelan, a peaceful retreat where we planned to spend our golden years. But looking back now, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore. About a year ago, Robert started working later than usual. His firm had taken on some major corporate clients, so his extended hours seemed reasonable at first. But then other things changed too. My formerly bookish husband, who preferred comfortable sweaters, suddenly developed an interest in fitness and fashion at 56. "I need to stay competitive with the younger attorneys," he explained, while purchasing designer suits and spending hours at the gym. He even started using social media, something he had always claimed was a waste of time. His Instagram account filled with business networking events and fitness progress photos. I tried to reconnect with him through special date nights. I would make reservations at our favorite restaurants, hoping to spark conversation about something other than work. I planned weekend getaways to our lake house, imagining romantic evenings by the fireplace. But Robert always seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone with a smile he tried to hide. "Is everything okay?" I would ask. "Just work stuff," he would reply, turning his phone away from me. Despite my efforts, the distance between us grew. When I tried to initiate intimacy, he would claim exhaustion from work or early meetings the next day. Our conversations became surface-level exchanges about household matters and schedules. The deep discussions about life politics and our future that I had always cherished seemed to vanish. I started to have suspicions, but I quickly dismissed them as paranoid thoughts. After 25 years of marriage, surely I was just being insecure. Robert would never betray our vows, our history, our life together. I convinced myself that this was just a phase, perhaps a midlife crisis that would pass. My friend Diane suggested I surprise Robert at work one day for lunch, but I refused. "I trust him," I told her firmly. "We just need to find our rhythm again." I threw myself into making our home even more beautiful, redecorating our bedroom with an expensive new mattress and luxury linens. I started cooking elaborate meals again, recipes I knew were his favorites. I even joined his new gym, hoping we could find connection through a shared activity. But nothing seemed to bridge the growing gap between us. Robert would compliment the house or the meal, but the warmth was missing from his eyes. He would politely decline gym sessions together, saying our schedules didn't align. He started taking business trips that seemed unnecessary, weekend conferences that he had skipped in previous years. Still, I held on to hope. 25 years of memories kept me believing that whatever was happening, we would weather it together. We had survived the stress of young parenthood, career setbacks, the loss of our parents. Surely this distance was temporary. That's why when everything fell apart, the shock was so complete. Nothing could have prepared me for what was coming, for how drastically my life was about to change, or for what I would discover about my own strength in the aftermath of betrayal. It was a Tuesday morning in April. Robert had left early for a breakfast meeting, kissing me quickly on the cheek before rushing out the door. I was enjoying my coffee and planning my workday when my phone chimed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. The first thing I saw when I opened it was my husband's naked back, the distinctive freckle pattern I had known for decades clearly visible. My coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor as I scrolled through image after image. 60 photos showing Robert with a young woman in various states of undress. In luxury hotels I recognized from our own stays. At our lake house on the leather sofa I had specially ordered, and most devastating of all, in our marital bed with the new linens I had just purchased. The message accompanying the photos read, "I'm his next wife. Thought you should see what you're about to lose. He's going to tell you this weekend, but I couldn't wait to introduce myself. I'm Stephanie, by the way." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the counter to steady myself as nausea washed over me in waves. My lungs couldn't seem to pull in enough air. 25 years of trust shattered in 60 images. I managed to make it to the bathroom before throwing up. Kneeling on the cold tile floor, I felt like I was watching myself from a distance, some other woman's life imploding while I observed. But the pain was too real, too physical to deny. This was happening to me. After I collected myself enough to stand, I looked more closely at the messages. The woman, Stephanie, was clearly younger, maybe early 30s. In one of the less explicit photos, I could see her company badge. She worked at Robert's firm. Further scrolling revealed metadata showing the affair had been going on for at least 8 months. With shaking hands, I called Diane. "Can you come over right now?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "Alice, what's wrong?" Diane asked, alarm evident in her tone. "Robert, he's been—" I couldn't finish the sentence before breaking down. "I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there," she said firmly. While waiting for Diane, I scrolled through the photos again, torturing myself with details. There was Stephanie in the silver dress at the firm's Christmas party, the same night Robert had told me he needed to leave early because a client was in crisis. There they were at the Four Seasons in Vancouver during the weekend Robert had claimed was a continuing education conference. And most painful, there they were, in our lake house drinking from the vintage wine glasses that had been a 20th anniversary gift from my parents. When Diane arrived 20 minutes later, she found me still at the kitchen table, phone in hand, surrounded by broken ceramic and cold coffee. She cleaned up the mess without a word, made fresh coffee, and sat beside me as I showed her everything. "He's been living a double life," I whispered. "Look at the dates on these. He was with her on our anniversary weekend when he claimed to have food poisoning and couldn't go out." Diane's face darkened with anger. "What are you going to do?" I stared at my phone for a long moment before typing a message to Robert. "We need to talk. Now." His response came immediately. "In a meeting. Everything okay?" The casual normalcy of his text made something break inside me. "No, everything is not okay. Come home. Now." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, on my way. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Diane offered to stay, but I needed to face him alone. After she left, I sat in our living room, the room I had designed with such care, and waited for the man who had shattered my world. Robert walked through the front door, looking concerned but irritated at having his workday interrupted. He still had no idea what was waiting for him. "Alice, what's going on that couldn't wait until tonight?" he asked, loosening his tie slightly as he set down his briefcase. I said nothing, just held out my phone with the first photo displayed. His face changed so fast, it would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Color drained from his cheeks, then flooded back in a deep flush. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Where did you get those?" He finally managed, his voice barely audible. "Your girlfriend sent them to me this morning. Stephanie, right? She seems very proud of her relationship with you. 60 photos worth of proud." He sank onto the couch opposite me, running his hands through his hair. "Alice, I can explain. It's not what you think." A harsh laugh escaped me. "Really, Robert? It's not what I think. Because I think you've been having an affair with a coworker who's young enough to be our daughter. I think you've been sleeping with her in our bed. I think you've taken her to places that were special to us. Please tell me how that's not what I think. His initial shock gave way to defensiveness. It just happened, Alice. I didn't plan it. Things like this don't just happen, Robert. 8 months don't just happen. Taking her to our lake house doesn't just happen. He stood up, pacing now. You've been so emotionally unavailable, Alice. Always focused on your work on the house. Stephanie listens to me. She understands the pressures I'm under. Each word was like a slap. So this is my fault? I've been emotionally unavailable? I've been trying for months to reconnect with you while you've been sleeping with someone else. I was going to tell you, he said, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. This weekend, I was going to ask for a divorce. The word divorce hung in the air between us. Despite the photos, despite the evidence before me, some part of me had still believed we could work through this, that 25 years meant something. You were planning to divorce me, I repeated slowly. For her. She understands me better, he said, a cruel finality in his tone. We connect on a different level. I haven't been happy for a long time, Alice. My shock was giving way to anger now. And instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying counseling or working on our marriage, you decided to cheat, to humiliate me, to throw away 25 years. Don't be dramatic, he said dismissively. These things happen. People grow apart. And frankly, the divorce will be clean. Thomas Wilkins is handling it for me. Thomas, another partner at his firm, and a specialist in ensuring wealthy men kept their assets in divorce. You've already spoken to a divorce attorney, I said flatly. It wasn't a question. I'm trying to make this as painless as possible, he replied, checking his watch. Look, I think we both need some space right now. I'll stay at a hotel for a few days while you process this. You mean you'll stay with Stephanie? I corrected him. He didn't deny it. I'll have my assistant arrange for movers to get some of my things tomorrow. And just like that, he picked up his briefcase and walked out, leaving me sitting in the ruins of our marriage. The door clicked shut behind him with a terrible finality. I sat motionless for several minutes before the tears came. Not gentle tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for air. I cried for the years wasted, for the love I thought was real, for the future that had evaporated in an instant. I called Diane, who returned immediately. She held me while I cried, made me drink water, prevented me from calling or texting Robert as I swung between despair and fury. I feel so stupid, I whispered as night fell. So worthless. He's already moved on, already planning his new life with her. This is not your fault, Diane said firmly. And this is not the end of your story, Alice. This is just the end of a chapter. But lying in our bed that night alone for the first time in decades, I couldn't imagine what the next chapter might look like. Everything I had built my life around had disappeared in a single morning. I felt hollowed out, a ghost in my own home. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a strange clarity. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps something fundamental had shifted inside me during the restless night. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would not be Robert's victim. I wouldn't be the pathetic ex-wife he and Stephanie laughed about. I wouldn't be the cautionary tale friends whispered about at parties. And I absolutely wouldn't let him walk away with the upper hand after what he had done. My first call was to a divorce attorney Diane had recommended years ago when her sister went through a contentious split. Marianne Ellison was known for her skill in handling high-asset divorces complicated by infidelity. She was able to see me that afternoon. Bring all financial documents you can access, she instructed over the phone. And those photos, they may be important. In her elegant downtown office, Marianne listened without interruption as I shared my story. Unlike the sympathetic head tilting I'd received from friends, her expression remained professionally neutral, analytical. Based on what you've told me, we have several advantages, she said when I finished. First, Washington is a community property state, but infidelity can impact spousal support in some circumstances, especially with his workplace misconduct. Workplace misconduct, I repeated. If Stephanie is his subordinate or in his department, The affair likely violates company ethics policies. That could mean serious professional consequences for him, which affects his earning capacity and potentially the firm's liability. She leaned forward. But there's something more concerning in what you've shared. The timeline of his financial behavior suggests he may have been preparing for this divorce for months. The new accounts you mentioned, the unusual withdrawals. We need to investigate possible financial concealment or even embezzlement from the firm to fund this lifestyle. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, I had a clear action plan. First, secure my financial independence by opening new accounts at a different bank. Second, gather and copy all financial records before Robert could hide them. Third, document everything about the affair and Robert's behavior. What about the photos? I asked. Can I use them? Legally, there are privacy considerations, Marianne advised carefully. But the existence of the photos, the fact they were sent to you, the locations they reveal, and the timeline they establish are all relevant. We won't distribute explicit content, but we will use the evidence they represent. I left Marianne's office with something I hadn't felt in 24 hours: hope. Not for reconciliation, but for justice. For emerging from this nightmare with my dignity and financial security intact. Over the next week, I discovered more than I ever wanted to know about my husband's deception. With my accountant's help, I found evidence of substantial funds transferred to offshore accounts. Credit card statements revealed jewelry purchases I'd never received and weekend trips I'd never taken. Most disturbing was what I learned when I quietly connected with other women at Robert's firm through professional networks. Stephanie wasn't the first younger employee Robert had pursued. 2 other women had left the firm in the past 5 years after uncomfortable situations with him. But as a senior partner with significant rainmaking abilities, complaints had been quietly settled and buried. 2 weeks after the photos arrived, I met with a public relations consultant who specialized in crisis management for individuals and small businesses. Janice Parker had helped several women navigate public scandals not of their making. Your husband and his girlfriend made a critical mistake, Janice explained. They created evidence and delivered it directly to you. Now you have choices about how to use that leverage. I don't want to sink to their level, I said firmly. This isn't about revenge, Alice. It's about protecting yourself and potentially others. What Robert has been doing at that firm is predatory. The affair with Stephanie is just the visible part of a pattern. Together with Marianne and Janice, I began formulating a strategic response that would expose Robert's behavior without exposing me to legal risk or public humiliation. For the first time since receiving those photos, I felt a sense of power returning. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning. And Robert had no idea what was coming. Over the following 2 weeks, I executed my plan with methodical precision. Each step was carefully considered, each move strategically timed. First, I secured digital and physical copies of all evidence. The photos Stephanie sent were backed up to multiple secure locations. Financial records were copied and stored both with my attorney and in a safe deposit box at my new bank. Text messages, emails, and phone records were preserved and cataloged. I consulted with a cybersecurity expert recommended by Janice to ensure Robert couldn't remotely delete evidence from our shared cloud accounts or home computers. We changed all passwords and set up monitoring to alert us of any unauthorized access attempts. Meanwhile, Robert was living in blissful ignorance with Stephanie, assuming I was falling apart. His few text messages were coldly practical, asking about collecting more of his belongings, or suggesting we talk about the house soon. I responded minimally, buying time. My next step was perhaps the most difficult: a discreet meeting with James Porter, the managing partner at Robert's firm. I requested the meeting through his executive assistant, mentioning only that I needed to discuss a sensitive matter regarding Robert Collins. James was clearly uncomfortable when I entered his office, likely expecting the emotional estranged wife scene. Instead, he found me professionally dressed and composed with a folder of non-explicit but damning evidence. Mr. Porter, I believe your firm has a strict policy against partners engaging in relationships with subordinates, I began calmly. His expression shifted from discomfort to alarm as I methodically outlined Robert's pattern of behavior, including his current affair with Stephanie Williams from the marketing department and previous incidents with other employees. These behaviors represent significant liability for your firm, I continued, particularly given that previous complaints appear to have been suppressed. James paled visibly. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Collins. We'll need to investigate. Of course. I've prepared a timeline and supporting documentation. I handed him a carefully curated selection of materials. My attorney has the complete file, including the 60 explicit photographs Ms. Williams sent me apparently from your office email system in some cases. Within 24 hours, both Robert and Stephanie were placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation. Robert's furious call came minutes after he was escorted from the building. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. "I simply shared some concerns about workplace ethics," I replied calmly. "Something you might have considered before using company resources to conduct your affair." While Robert was dealing with the professional fallout, I took legal steps to secure our home. With Marianne's guidance, I filed the necessary paperwork to prevent Robert from selling or transferring any major assets without court approval. I also changed the locks, which was perfectly legal since I had remained in the home and Robert had voluntarily left. The next phase involved carefully selecting which non-explicit photos to use as evidence in our divorce proceedings. These included images of Robert and Stephanie at our lake house establishing unauthorized use of marital property at various hotels, documenting expenditure of marital funds, and at work events confirming the workplace connection. No intimate details were included, just enough to establish the timeline and nature of the betrayal. With Janice's help, I prepared for the social fallout by contacting key friends in our circle before Robert could spin his narrative. I didn't share explicit details, just the simple truth. Robert had been having an affair with a younger colleague, had planned to divorce me, and there was substantial evidence of financial impropriety. Most surprisingly, as I gathered evidence of Robert's financial deceptions, I discovered he had been embezzling from client accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle with Stephanie. This information was carefully documented and provided to both my divorce attorney and anonymously to the firm's compliance officer. By the time I was ready for the final phase, Robert was already facing severe consequences on multiple fronts. His affair had cost him his administrative access at work, his reputation among colleagues, and potentially his partnership. But he still didn't realize the full extent of what was coming. 3 weeks after Stephanie's photos arrived, I was ready for the final confrontation at the firm's ethics committee meeting where I had been invited to provide testimony. I rehearsed my statement repeatedly with Marianne and Janice, ensuring I would remain composed and focused regardless of Robert's reaction. The night before the meeting, I slept peacefully for the first time since discovering the affair. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman reclaiming her power, her dignity, and her future. The law firm's conference room was imposingly formal, with its dark wood table and leather chairs. 9 people sat around the table, the 5-member ethics committee, James Porter, the HR director, the firm's general counsel, and me. 2 empty chairs awaited Robert and Stephanie, who would enter separately. I had dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, my hair neatly styled, minimal makeup covering the traces of stress from recent weeks. I wanted to project professionalism, strength, and credibility. Robert entered first, stopping short when he saw me. He had clearly not expected my presence. His attorney friend Thomas Wilkins followed, looking grim. They took their seats across from me without speaking. Stephanie arrived last, her youthful confidence visibly shaken. She avoided looking at either Robert or me. James Porter opened the proceedings with a brief statement about the firm's commitment to professional ethics and appropriate workplace conduct. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Collins, would you please share your information with the committee?" I opened the professional portfolio I had prepared and began my presentation calmly and methodically. 3 weeks ago, I received 60 explicit photographs from Ms. Williams showing her and my husband in various locations, including this office building. The accompanying message stated, and I quote, "I'm his next wife. Thought you should see what you're about to lose." Robert started to interrupt, but Thomas placed a restraining hand on his arm. I continued, "While the personal betrayal is not this committee's concern, the use of firm resources, time, and facilities for this affair is relevant to your ethics code. Additionally, the pattern of senior partner involvement with junior staff creates significant liability for this firm." I presented the timeline of the affair supported by non-explicit photographic evidence emails sent from company accounts and calendar entries showing falsified client meetings that were actually rendezvous with Stephanie. Most damaging was the evidence I presented of Robert's financial improprieties. In reviewing our finances after discovering the affair, I identified suspicious transactions that appeared to involve client funds. I've provided this documentation to your compliance department separately. Robert's face had progressed from anger to shock to something approaching fear as I methodically dismantled his professional reputation. Stephanie was silently crying, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. When I finished my presentation, the room was silent. Finally, James spoke. "Mr. Collins, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Robert attempted to portray the affair as a private matter, irrelevant to his professional conduct. He tried to suggest I was a vindictive wife making false accusations, but faced with the documentation I had provided, his denials rang hollow. The committee deliberated privately for 30 minutes while we waited in separate areas. When we reconvened, their decision was swift and definitive. "Mr. Collins, the evidence of ethical violations is substantial and concerning." The committee chair stated, "Effective immediately, you are terminated from the firm. Ms. Williams, your employment is also terminated for violation of workplace policies." As we left the meeting, I caught Robert's eye one final time. The man I had loved for 25 years looked suddenly old and diminished. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity quickly extinguished by the memory of his cruelty. The next morning, I published a carefully worded post on LinkedIn and Facebook about workplace ethics and the importance of holding powerful people accountable. Without naming names or sharing explicit content, I referenced my experience discovering my husband's workplace affair and the firm's appropriate response to the ethics violations. The post focused on professional standards and corporate responsibility rather than personal details. Nevertheless, it quickly gathered attention first locally within Seattle's business community, then regionally, as others shared similar experiences. Business journals picked up the story, praising the firm's decisive action while criticizing the culture that had allowed Robert's behavior to continue unchecked for years. Former employees came forward with their own stories, creating a movement much larger than my individual situation. Robert's professional reputation was in tatters. Several clients withdrew their business from him personally, though most stayed with the firm under different partners. His attorney friend Thomas quietly withdrew from representing him in our divorce after learning about the financial improprieties, which were now under investigation by the State Bar Association. Stephanie's family and friends learned of her role not through any action of mine, but through the natural spread of information in our interconnected world. Her parents, whom I had met at firm events, sent me a heartfelt apology letter that I chose not to answer. This wasn't about punishing Stephanie, who was in many ways another victim of Robert's predatory behavior, albeit one who had made poor choices. Most surprisingly, several female attorneys and staff members from the firm contacted me privately to express their gratitude. One senior associate wrote, "For years, many of us felt powerless to challenge the culture that protected men like Robert. Your courage has created space for real change." Indeed, within months, the firm implemented new harassment policies, mandatory ethics training, and an independent reporting system for misconduct allegations. What had begun as one woman's stand against personal betrayal had evolved into institutional change. And through it all, I never shared the explicit photos or the most intimate details of the betrayal. My victory came not from humiliating Robert and Stephanie, but from reclaiming my own power and helping protect others who might have become his future victims. The final divorce settlement was filed 6 months after those 60 photos arrived in my messages. Given the evidence of Robert's misconduct and financial improprieties, his initial demands quickly gave way to a settlement heavily in my favor. I retained our Seattle home and the lake house, along with 70% of our joint assets. The judge was particularly unsympathetic to Robert, given the evidence of embezzlement, which had resulted in separate legal proceedings and the likelihood of his disbarment. Robert and Stephanie's relationship collapsed under the stress of unemployment and legal troubles. Last I heard, he had moved to Portland trying to rebuild some semblance of a legal career while facing potential criminal charges for the financial misconduct. I used part of the settlement to launch my own interior design firm, specializing in creating healing spaces for people recovering from trauma. What began as a way to rechannel my energy became a thriving business with a growing client list and feature articles in design magazines. The early days after the discovery had been dark. I won't pretend otherwise. There were nights I couldn't sleep, days I could barely function. I found a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma, and her guidance was invaluable in my healing journey. Diane and my other true friends formed a support network that carried me through the worst moments. They sat with me through tears, celebrated small victories, and never once said, "I told you so," about the signs I had missed. My children's reactions had been painful initially. Jessica was furious with both of us, at first, angry at her father for his betrayal and at me for making it public. Michael withdrew, processing the shock in his own quiet way. But over time, with honest conversations and family therapy, we rebuilt our relationships on a foundation of truth, rather than the illusion of perfect family harmony. About a year after the divorce, I met Martin, a kind widower, who asked me out after a community fundraiser. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and absolute transparency. He admired my strength in handling the divorce with dignity, and I appreciated his gentle patience as I cautiously opened my heart again. The most unexpected outcome of the entire experience was finding myself something of an informal consultant on workplace ethics. Several companies invited me to speak about creating cultures of accountability and respect. I partnered with employment attorneys to develop training programs for identifying and addressing harassment. My interior design business thrived partly due to the visibility my story had created, but mostly because clients responded to my philosophy of creating spaces that reflect authentic lives, rather than glossy magazine perfection. I also found friendship with several women who had experienced similar betrayals, forming a private support group that met monthly. There was healing in sharing our stories, in witnessing each other's growth, and celebrating each step toward renewed self-trust. Looking back now, I can see that what Stephanie intended as an act of cruelty became ironically the catalyst for the most authentic chapter of my life. Had she not sent those photos, I might have continued in blissful ignorance, or Robert might have controlled the divorce narrative, leaving me with far less than I deserved after 25 years of partnership. The deepest lesson I learned through all of this was that true strength comes not from avoiding pain or seeking revenge, but from choosing dignity in your response to betrayal. By focusing on justice rather than vengeance, I not only secured my own future, but helped create safer workplaces for others. I still have the occasional moment of sadness for what was lost, for the memories now viewed through the lens of deception. But those moments grow fewer as time passes, and my new life continues to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. To anyone facing similar betrayal, I would say this: you are stronger than you know. The end of one chapter, however painful, can lead to a more authentic and fulfilling story if you refuse to let someone else's choices define your worth or limit your future. Have you ever had to completely reinvent your life after betrayal or loss? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story helped you feel less alone in your journey, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes what looks like an ending is really just the beginning of something far better than you could have imagined.